Welcome to this week's episode of the CPG View, the #1 CPG information source for global omnichannel leaders. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining this week's episode of the CPG View. Pumped to have you on. I know you and I know many of the same people and we're in similar circles. I'm so happy we were able to finally get together. Also a user of several of your products.
I hear that.
Find out. But before we get started, would you mind introducing yourself and the company you're with?
Yeah, sure. I'm Jennifer. I'm from OLLY. We're a Unilever brand. I have been there almost 4 years. I'm the Director of Direct to Consumer, Martech, and Digital Compliance.
Very cool. Well, hey, we'll get started. And Ty, would you mind introducing yourself and the company you're with?
Yeah, I'm Tyler Despain. I manage our dietary supplement portfolio here at Pattern and excited to talk more.
Awesome. Jennifer, so to your point, in your role as Director of DTC, Martech, and Compliance, how do you think about balancing the strategic vision, which can be easy to put on paper, but tough to actually execute, with the actual execution component as you think about having a seamless, impactful digital customer experience?
That's such a great question. And I would start by saying one of my favorite things about my role is that it does include compliance, because otherwise I think you end up with this environment where like people want to do something. There's a team that has this great idea, they want to do something, and then there's another person who says no. And so having that be in one person really is super efficient. Like I know what's a no before it ever even gets off the ground. So that's great. For me, in my experience, the best thing you can do to kind of balance out, not getting stuck in the weeds and being strategic is, first of all, to know your strengths. You have to know what you're good at and where your gaps are, and surround yourself with people who fill those gaps. The last thing you want to do is hire people that are just like you or have the same skill set that you do or the same experience you do. So that, I think, balancing out your team is really, really important to make sure that you have everybody and all the points of view. There's somebody that I work with at OLLY, and I describe her as the other half of my brain. And I don't know that I could make decisions without her at this point, but I know that everything that she is good at is what I am not good at. And we just fit together. We fit together perfectly. So I think that's really important. I think it's so easy to get bogged down in the day-to-day and lose track of strategic anything in any part of your life. I mean, in your life, in your career. For me, the discipline around what we do and in kind of being in this business is really just about constantly road mapping everything. You need to plan. Planning is free. There's really no reason not to do it. You can record your dreams. You can record what you want to do in the next quarter, and you can really map it out and plan it out. You can bring the team around it. Everybody can agree, and then you can kind of focus on the execution piece. But when it all comes down to anything in direct to consumer, road mapping is everything, even if it's not just web development. There are other things there that you can get on your plan that you won't lose, and that you can figure out when is the right moment. When is the right moment to add subscriptions to your e-commerce stack? What is that? Where's that line of when it's time? Just having all of that planned out ahead of time will just save you so much time and effort down the road.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said a couple things there I just wanted to quickly double click on. I totally agree with your point. One of the first things you said reminds me of a famous saying of, and I might get this wrong because it's been a few weeks since I said it, but I think it's strategy without tactics is a daydream, and tactics without strategy is a nightmare. I think we've probably all lived that at some point in our career. And the second thing is, you said, I don't know if you said work streams or roadmaps, but that old saying of it's not a plan until somebody puts it on paper.
That is so true. So true.
And I've found, I don't know if you found this, but if, there's great ideas that happen and verbalization that occurs, and just the act, whether it's in your personal life or your professional life, of actually writing it down on a writing it down is highly effective. And I couldn't agree more with you. I love that.
Yeah, I've definitely worked places where there were more dreamers than doers, and I've worked places where there were more doers than dreamers, and it's just not a good balance. You have to balance those two kinds of people.
Love that. All right, Ty, over to you.
Yeah, so with your expertise in replatforming and managing diverse e-commerce platforms like Shopify Plus and Salesforce Commerce Cloud, what are some of the key challenges you see businesses face, and how do you approach solving them?
It's probably my favorite question you could ask. This is something I feel really, really passionate about, very strongly about. There are so many brands, businesses, small to large, and everything in between that become over dependent on agencies. And I'll start kind of in the world of web development because I think this is where it happens the most. An agency will love to come in and build you the most custom thing you have ever seen in your entire life. And this happens all the time. And they will build it so that they're really the only ones that can make basic changes to it. Like you suddenly can't change your own homepage banner. And I wouldn't say that this is a wide strategy. I think it's something that just kind of happens in this business where obviously they want to continue to feel useful to you. And then you end up paying them a retainer of $20,000 a month to do basic stuff on your website. So that to me is the thing it really bothers me. I really don't like it. I feel like it's a thing of the past. And with the advent of Shopify and kind of the what I would call almost the democratization of e-commerce, anybody can build a store. Like anybody can. It's not that hard. And so I think when you're a bigger business, there's some pressure to have this overcomplicated system or like a homegrown platform. And I feel like whenever you say homegrown platform to a bunch of developers, everybody's like, oh, like nobody wants that. You want a scalable solution that you can kind of plug and play. You should be able to manage your own site. If you can't, you've made it too complicated. And it's really hard to kind of break that cycle, I think, too, especially when you're a brand that's been kind of on this path for a long time. And I'm not going to call out any platforms specifically, but I do think the days of the monstrous, super high cost e-commerce platforms is over. And you don't need that. You really don't. You can be on Shopify. You can be as lean as you want on Shopify. You can be as complicated as you want on Shopify. There's a lot of space in between. One of the things I do kind of on the side is I do replatform brands off of kind of like legacy big platforms on a Shopify. And I love it. And it makes me feel good. And I feel like I'm doing something good for the world because I build sites that they can manage themselves. Like it's built for a person. It's not built for a web developer. So unless you have a team of web developers on your staff, that's probably the direction you need to go. You need to get something that you can manage and that you don't need to spend, $500,000 a year on an agency just to do basic stuff. That's the thing I think that gets me the most.
Yeah, I agree with you. I spent 15 years in large CPG, kind of multi-billion dollar industry types, and then spent 5 years in private equity. And the amount of money that was invested in exactly what you're saying, Jennifer, is kind of mind-boggling. It was mind-boggling then, and I was the one managing the budget. And it's even more mind-boggling now, to your point, where the whole monolithic approach to systems, I mean, in my opinion, is a thing of the past. And that old saying of if you can't explain it like you're a 5-year-old, you don't understand it well enough. And you see that in some of these larger organizations, exactly the point you made of you have this kind of false sense of complication that is when you kind of look under the hood on this thing, you really need to have a core set of capabilities that are easily to articulate and add value to a brand and have a seamless experience for an end user. Anything outside of that, obviously there's regulatory things and compliance, to your point, if you have certain products that you're selling, but I completely agree with you. And I think it's going to be even more as we look towards the future, it will be more of a democratization of the capabilities that exist, probably not only in direct to consumer, but also in other areas of the tech stack that probably once were, few individuals or businesses owned the majority of the share. I think that will also continue to evolve.
Totally agree with you. I think a CRM is a great example of that, right? Like what it took 10 years ago to migrate from one ESP to another. Oh my God, it was like the worst thing that you would have to do. It was like a living nightmare. Today, it takes like a week. I mean, it's incredible how that technology has kind of come along and there are more players. And it absolutely used to be like 5 major CRM companies that you could work with, and that was about it. And now there are a lot of choices. There are a lot of choices for pretty much anywhere you are budget wise. It's great. It's great. We're moving along.
Yeah. Yeah. So I won't mention the name, but we would replatform. There was a few times we replatformed, and again, I'm not going to say any names, but I remember, to your point, it was like planning the it was like planning a wedding on steroids.
Exactly.
There were hundreds of people for go live day, and then there was post implementation
Mhm.
teams. I mean, there were hundreds of people for this activity. And if anyone listening, if you are doing it this way now, I would highly suggest you reach out to Jennifer on
It's a
LinkedIn,
second opinion.
or Ty or me. If we're not going to sell you anything, but if you want to get some open perspectives, I think we could probably help you out there. But hey, Jennifer, I did want to ask you, so for my day job, what I'm really passionate about, I work for a company called Pattern, and they're a marketplace accelerator. My passion projects are, the podcast that we're on now, and the Retail E-commerce Club, which is a group focused around empowering, educating, and encouraging executives. On this Pattern side, this is where I want to ask you this one question about compliance,
Mhm.
because Pattern is this business, and a very large business, and a majority of or a very large portion of their business is vitamins, minerals, and supplements. This is how
Mhm.
I know this compliance. This is how I'm familiar with this, that I maybe wouldn't have been prior to joining Pattern.
Mhm.
But as you think about digital compliance and its importance today, how do you ensure that requirements are being met without compromising or maybe stifling unintentionally either innovation or the user experience?
I think it's so important to remember first that these regulations and these requirements are in place to protect customers. So right there, that I think dictates your customer experience right there. Everything that we do, everything that is kind of falls into that compliance bucket of, you know, managing your data, ADA accessibility, consumer health data laws, like all of those things are intended to protect people. And at the end of the day, we all serve people. So I think to me, it doesn't feel threatening at all. It really does feel like it's something that we have to honor. And like one of our greatest responsibilities is managing our customers' PII. Like that is something that, we kind of like will fight to the death on. And there's a good reason for that. And that's because we are responsible for protecting our customers' information. So I think that really does, the way I look at it, feels less stifling and compromising as much as there are guardrails here that remind us all the time of what our responsibilities are when it comes to protecting our customers. We, of course, have FDA requirements as well, in terms of making claims and what we can say, what we can't say. The supplement space is highly, highly regulated. Anytime you see an ad from us, anytime you see literally anything from us, I can guarantee you it's been through like 5 levels of regulatory approval. And anyone in the supplement space knows that's the case. And that's just kind of the way it is. And again, it's to protect customers. Like we don't want to make promises to customers that we can't keep. We don't want to lead a customer on and let them believe that a product's going to do something for them that it's not. And if we can't be truthful, then we're probably in the wrong business. We're probably not making products well. So, I mean, I think that it's really important as well. But kind of going back to CRM, I think is the same. It's the same way when you think about like marketing opt-ins. And it used to just be kind of this huge focus on, we want to have a big list. We want to have a big list. Let's list growth. We want to grow our list by 15% this year. And to me, the reality is like, why do you want people on your email list that don't want to be there? That is not what we're doing here. Like the goal is to use this list to communicate to customers about things that they want to hear about. So if you're kind of building a big email list at the detriment of honoring your customers' intentions, you're not helping yourself. You're annoying people. You are wasting your time. You're wasting your emails. But I think subscriptions can be the same way. If you are tricking people into subscribing to your product, they're going to unsubscribe. They're going to be mad. They're probably not going to come back to your brand. They might do some chargebacks. Like there are consequences to everything. So for me and for Ollie, we are one of our actually our company values is transparency. We're never going to tell you our product's going to do something that it won't. Our website is going to say exactly what it should. I will fight to the death to protect your data, your private and your PII. And I think, even with kind of where we are right now politically, there have been states passing these consumer health laws that are really also intended to protect people's data. And if you're not familiar with them, there's several states, and there's several states kind of like having this in the works where pretty much any kind of health information that a customer gives you in like a quiz or in, kind of like some sort of selection of interests anything like that has to now be treated like PII. Like it has the same rules and regulations around it as anything else that's personally identifiable. And the reason for that is truly to make people feel safe that their data isn't going to be shared with the government. It's not going to be sold to a company. I think one of the best examples of that are like period tracking apps. There's obviously a lot of stuff going on in that area. And I think, women want to feel safe, like their data is safe, that it's not going to go somewhere. So again, these laws are here to protect people and give them a sense of comfort that they have rights, and they do have rights. You want us to delete your data? We'll delete your data. So I think we've come a long way as it pertains to innovation. And I think about like product innovation. Again, like we're never going to tell you a product does something that it doesn't do. So that kind of goes back to the quality of the product you're creating. If you are creating something that isn't doing what you promised, then that kind of comes back to you. I feel like the innovation piece starts with making the best product you can make, making sure it's tested, making sure it works before you go out and, make any claims about it at all.
Yeah, great points. Ty, anything to add on that point?
Yeah, I mean, you've honed your broad skill set across digital marketing, SEO, and analytics. Which of these strengths do you think is most critical for driving success in the e-commerce space today, and why?
Well, unfortunately, it's all of those. I think that's what makes e-commerce hard. And that's what makes it fun, is that you have to be a logistics manager. You have to be an inventory manager. You have to understand digital advertising. You have to be a web developer. You've got to understand accounting. You've got to do reconciliation. You have to understand what customers are doing. You have to ship products successfully. You have to manage the P&L. So I think to me, that's what I love about this business, is that you really get to do all of these things and you get to really live your business from very beginning to end. And I love that. That's kind of what keeps me going in this space. And in all of those spaces, there's a lot of room for automation and innovation too. So it's like you can constantly see how everything connects to itself. And so it gives you really a bigger picture of your business than I think you would get in almost any other type of channel. I don't know that I think any of them are important, but I do kind of want to go back to what I said at the beginning. There are areas where you don't feel super competent. You need to kind of staff for that. You need to plan for that. You need to make sure that you have someone where that is their core competency. That they make sure you have a really strong accounting team. Make sure you have someone in the logistics attitude of like we are agile and we love e-commerce. Especially in CPG, I think there's a lot of times where you have certain departments that if you go and you ask them, who's your customer, they're going to be like Walmart, Target. And that's a cultural thing of understanding everything comes down to a person. Everything we do comes down to what a person wants and whether they're happy with that or not. So I think that culturally you just have to teach that and you have to talk about it. And you know what? I think thinking about all those skill sets, I think one of the most important things you have to be able to do is number one, like advocate for e-commerce and D2C. I mean, we had a huge boom D2C during COVID, and then you saw a lot of brands kind of like backing off of D2C. And I think being an advocate, being a cheerleader for everything that direct to consumer can bring to your brand, it's not just revenue, it's all of that first party data. It's the relationship you can have directly with the customer. Sometimes you have to be that internal cheerleader for that. And you also have to be an educator of why it matters, why it's important, why we do the things that we do. So maybe that all of those tactical skills are great, but I think at the end of the day, you still have to be the person that can represent that in your company, educate people on its importance, and make sure everyone sees it as something that's critical to the success of a brand.
Yeah.
And I was going to say a quick follow-on question. How do you feel like staffing all of these roles or inside an organization? Do you feel you're understaffed a lot of the time? I mean, there's so many hats you have to wear. It's always interesting to hear how brands think about that.
That's a great question because we are a brick and mortar brand. And, if you're a digitally native brand and you are built for D2C, like all of your infrastructure is built to support D2C. We don't have that luxury. Like we're built to support Target and Walmart. That is what our infrastructure is. So that transition, I think, has been really challenging, super interesting, because you do have people that are like their experience is managing Walmart reconciliations, or their experience is shipping pallets. It's not shipping to people. So I think it's really hard to kind of make that transition sometimes. And sometimes it's not always going to be the same people. Sometimes you will have to bring on new people with new skills and experience. But even OLLY going from a startup to becoming a Unilever brand, That's quite an evolution over a pretty short period of time. And, we were startups. So like the startup mentality is great. Everybody kind of chips in, everybody kind of has a pretty broad skill set. But then once you start scaling, that challenge changes. Suddenly it's not, we just want people to know we exist. Suddenly it's, we've got all these competitors. Like we have to keep focusing on household penetration. And there are all these new challenges that aren't the same. And a lot of people have a heart for startup. I don't. I'll be freely admit I do not. And so like a lot of people I think migrate back to the startup world. I love scaling a business. I love maturing a business. We're in kind of what I describe what our awkward teenage years. Like sometimes we're grown and sometimes we're not. And I think that's a really fun challenge and it's a great place to be to kind of be able to see what the next 10 years look like.
Yeah, I think, a couple things on that one. You said a few things that I really resonated with me. One, keeping the consumer at the center. We've had so many different brands on the show. I won't mention them all, but they're just significant brands and they're you never say it during the call, but you can sense it. The brands that are the most successful, there's this inner underlying sense of who they're serving and who that consumer is, to your exact point earlier. And it's interesting to hear you and kind of what the brand's focused on. I'm not surprised you all are as successful as you are, although you all might not feel like you're successful at times. I mean, but as someone outside looking in, I think I might have even reached out to you to have you on too, because I am such a fan of the brand. And, so I think that's one thing it's really interesting to hear you say. And then two, I think to your exact point, many of us probably are also in that awkward teenage stage where like maybe we have our braces, maybe we don't. Like
Yeah.
we're like we just got our braces taken off, and but that's so true. Like in terms of the brand and going from a pure direct to consumer digitally native brand to being bought, by Unilever and part of that, large organization. I mean, one of the biggest in the world, similar to even what on the Pattern side, Pattern went from, I don't know, like 10, $20 million a year to, a billion plus in 10 years. And they even feel like they're in that awkward teenage, like haven't totally got their footing yet. But it's promising to see. And I think both of those brands, if you ask anyone outside in what they think, they're like, oh, I love that brand. I like love that brand. So just really, really interesting. So love your perspective there. I wanted to ask you one more question to make sure
Sure.
we get you out on time. So, as we look at the future and as you look at the future, what excites you most about the kind of intersection, to your point, of tech and marketing? And how do you think your role maybe will start to evolve in shaping the next wave of e-commerce and innovation?
Yeah, I love that question. I mean, when I was in college, this didn't exist. This wasn't something you could go get a degree in even. So I always try to remember that and put that in perspective of like, we probably can't even imagine what 10 years from now is going to look like. So that I think is always important to remember, that you can't use the framework that you have today to imagine what the future is going to look like. Obviously, AI is going to be a huge piece of that. My feeling on AI is you're going to have to either get on the bus or you're going to be under the bus. I mean, again, we're highly regulated, so there are quite a few things that like we would never do with AI. Like we're never going to use it to write product descriptions. We're never going to use it to create images, all of these things. But there are a lot of uses for it that are not necessarily like generative AI, but they're these decisioning things that we can't do in real time. Like a person cannot do it. So that I see that like real-time analysis that's going to come from AI and kind of reading triggers and like back-end decisioning and maybe what we deliver to a customer in that moment to get them to convert. Maybe it's a 20% discount. Maybe it's a suggestion for them to upgrade to a subscription. But like being able to be there at that moment and trigger that reaction that's the right one, that's going to be huge. And that kind of rolls out to like personalization at scale. Like that's what it will look like. When you go on a site, the site's going to know it's you. You're going to have an experience that is for you. And that's really, really exciting, kind of overwhelming. But you see companies like Format doing this kind of like custom funnel experience from the paid ad to conversion. That's pretty exciting. We're there's a lot of web overlay tools that you can use to kind of customize what images they see, what products they see, what ads they see on site. All of those things are going to become easy. And those things they've never been easy. But I see that kind of really evolving even over like the next 18 months to 2 years. I think it's going to go really fast. And what's out there in the world, I don't even want to predict it yet, because I am just excited to be in this business. And one of the most exciting, like satisfying things for me is when I see a tech product that solves a problem that I couldn't even clearly articulate. And then you see the solution, and then suddenly you understand this whole problem. And I think those people that are creating those solutions understand problems far more than I do in order to be able to kind of create this solution. But it has happened to me several times where I've seen a demo and just been like, I can't believe this solves all these problems that I didn't even realize were intertwined. And so that I hope to see more of that. And the thing in e-commerce, to evolve, you have to keep learning. Otherwise, you're gonna be dead in the water. So just constant attitude of openness to learning and openness to evolving, I think is required to be successful in a role like this.
Yeah, I mean, two things there. One, there's a saying, design is intelligence made visible.
Mm-hmm.
And your point about seeing a tech solution, you're like, oh my gosh, that solves
Mm-hmm.
all these problems.
Yeah.
I agree with you. When you see that, you're like, oh, this is great. I think that's going to be a huge thing that,
Mm-hmm.
every year it'll continue to build. So I totally agree with you on that one. And then I think the other one is, you either get on the bus or you're going to be under the bus. And
Yeah.
I think it's either you embrace, whether it's AI or any other
Mm-hmm.
thing that is rapidly changing or disrupting, learn about it, lean into it. I try to tell our kids this as well, or even just individuals that I support on a day-to-day basis. It's, get comfortable with it, get familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
When you use it all the time, that's for you to decide, but you don't want to be kind of on the outside looking in. You want to participate and be an active participant, really, because it's going to be very important for your future. Well, Ty, anything to add on to that one before we wrap up?
No, this was great. A lot of smiling because I've worked for some of these companies you probably are talking about, so it's been kind of fun to hear.
I know we can name names offline.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll all remain anonymous on the podcast, but I think
Yes.
we all know who we're talking about.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
well, Jennifer, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate your time. Huge fan. We're both huge fans of the brand, and just, again, appreciate it and look forward to this airing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. There's nothing more fun than talking to people who do what you do and understand what you do and have the same passion. So thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you, Jennifer.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the CPG View, the #1 CPG information source for global omni-channel leaders.